I think we'll hand this over to the audience now, so I'm sure lots of people have lots of things to ask you. Any questions? I see some hands up. There you go.
Hello, Tara Conlan from The Guardian. Can I just ask what you're doing now, Frankie? Because you're doing for Radio 4, I think it was Happy's, but what other shows are you doing for television or radio, please?
I'm doing Live at the Apollo next month, and I've got a show, like I'm doing a stand-up spot, and they're doing a sort of Live at the Apollo version of that kind of show for Scottish independence. I'm working on an iPlayer pilot for the referendum, which is a bit sort of like Charlie Brooker's Weekly Wipe or something like that, but we've not quite got into it yet.
We should be doing a great deal more. Okay, any other questions? Yeah, just here.
Hi, is there anything that you actually really regret having said or tweeted, and why?
I mean, lots of things, it would be hard to go through all of them, but sometimes it's like, I think the real failure you make as a comedian is you imagine that empathy is enough, or that your engagement is enough, providing you're saying something where you feel that you're on the right side. I think you have to examine it. There was a joke I did on Tramadol Nights that was about why Britain shouldn't feel proud of itself for building hospitals in Afghanistan, and it ends up being this really harsh punchline about it's a bit like because we're saying, get better for the next time we come round. It's a bit like a rapist buying his victim yoga lessons. And I thought, well, this is justified, because it's such a horrendous thing and all that. But then when I read about it later, Britain didn't build any hospitals in Afghanistan, and neither did America. There was one hospital built in the whole occupation of Afghanistan that was by the Italian Red Cross. So, I'd actually given a very misleading impression, which is a propaganda impression, which I'd taken on board because I'd just not thought about it enough. And it was such a serious subject and such a serious punchline. I should be thinking about it, But there's lots of those, but you can't go back and change all of them.
Next time we do see you on a big, proper, long-running show, though, do you think you'll think any differently, act any differently, produce yourself any differently? Or are we going to get the old Frankie Boyle?
No, you would have to, because there's not any space for that anymore. And also, I'm not 35 anymore, so I don't really particularly feel like jumping about doing loads of jokes about rape.
Next question. Yep, over here.
Oh, hello. I'm Shona Baldwin from Outline Productions. Frankie, sort of the last hour, and also from all your performance, you use the C word quite a lot. And I'm just wondering, who's the biggest cunt?
In the world or here?
Ever.
Between us?
Ever.
Let's hope it's not the same answer.
It's very difficult to say. Part of my problem is the difference between my stage persona and me, really, is I'm not really terribly judgmental in real life. So even if I watch something like Derek, I don't think this is fucking terrible. I think Stephen Merchant is amazingly funny, So I find it hard really to feel that bad about anyone, because you always I think you get into your 40s and you just sort of go, yeah, I can sort of imagine how someone with a certain childhood and a certain background might be like that. So for example, you look at our ruling class now, and you think, well, why are they like that? Boris Johnson or someone. You think, well, they're broken into that system the same way that the Spartans broke people in, You get taken away from your family aged 7 or 8, you get put in a single-sex environment, and then they do what a mind control cult does. They bore you with cricket and Latin and Latin homework, and very suddenly, sodomy. And you're someone like Boris Johnson. You probably evolve that fringe as some kind of makeshift cum shield, and you meet those people now, and you think, well, I have some kind of understanding. I come from some other place that makes me like this. I find it really difficult to judge people. Even Clarkson, we're talking about him there, he's like that for a certain reason. He comes from a certain background where he's taught to not empathise. I mean, his worst traits are encouraged.
The French say to understand all is to forgive all.
Right.
That's what they say. It's roughly that, isn't it? So why are you so judgmental on stage? What's that psychologically? What are you acting out there if that's not you?
Well, I think that's kind of what comedy is, or maybe even what fiction is a kind of way to imagine yourself into some kind of morality, you know? Well, here's an interesting thing. My friend is a writer, you know, like a writer for hire, so he does like episodes of Merlin and stuff like that. And he got asked to do one of these BBC crime dramas, like a prime time one. That one with Trevor Eve in it. What was that? Waking the Dead. So it was about people trafficking. And he writes this episode, and the big twist in the episode is the people trafficker is a hedge fund manager, and he's just doing it because the margins on people trafficking are amazing. And the BBC say to him, no, that's too confusing for the viewers. We just want him to be a Russian guy called Sergei. And he's a gangster, right? So the guy rewrites it, and I saw this draft, which was amazing. It's like the gangster, who's called Sergei, borrows the money from investors and hedge funds and investment banks, because the margins are amazing. He does this great speech at the end. And the BBC come back and they go, no, we want him to have a vest and tattoos, and he's doing this because he's evil. And at that point, you know, someone else goes and finishes the script, you know. And a couple of months later, they break into a brothel. They do arrests in a brothel in New England, and they find that this chain of brothels that are all run with people who are people trafficked is run by a hedge fund. And they go and arrest dozens of people at this hedge fund, and they're just going, well, the margins are amazing, you know? And I think that's kind of what fiction is. If we can get out of those little railway lines that we're trammelled in of don't say that, don't say this, we start to kind of imagine reality, you know? So even that thing I just said there about Boris Johnson and how those people are brought up and encouraged in sociopathic traits, there's a slight element of truth in there, you know? And I kind of think that's what it's for.
Excellent. Well, I hope we see a great deal more of you, Frankie, in the next year. It's been a pleasure talking to you as well. Also, the first time we've heard makeshift cum shields mentioned during the TV festival as well. Thank you so much for coming. Thank you so much for coming to the whole festival. And thank you especially to Mr. Frankie Boyle.